weirdest comment I got was, "Man, this guy sure likes feet." And I think we talked about this.
You did the full Tarantino.
It's just like, no, it's the opposite. I hate feet so much. And for me, like, the most grotesque thing I could show is dead feet.
Everybody, welcome to the show. Our friend, returning friend, you may have heard him on the Cure episode this October, filmmaker, writer, producer, all-around busy guy, Nathan Sellers. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to, so you actually are our first filmmaker interview on the Filmmaker Friday, so a very illustrious, prestigious thing. You can put laurels of that on all your stuff from now on when we make them. Would you like to tell the people about the projects you have online, what you're working on, as a quick introduction before we get started here?
Yeah, so my film, The Watcher, just finished its festival circuit and run, and you can watch it now on Vimeo. And you can find links for that at lonehorsefilms.com, my production website. It's a film collaborative. So you'll find even more content on there. But right now, Methuselah, experimental horror doc that I finished last spring, is still making its rounds, and it's going to probably be screening until August so far. And so, yeah, feel free to catch that. That's going to be in like New York City at the Video Art and Experimental Film Festival this coming weekend, which is I think November 24th. Don't know when this is airing, but
if you have a time machine, that will be helpful.
Yeah. If you have a time machine, you could go see it there. But we'll be at Stranger Days Independent Film Festival as well in North Carolina and such. But Methuselah is making the rounds, and then I'm just basically writing now, other than producing other work. So I'm producing maybe 4 films at the moment. Wow. Different scales ranging from 10,000 to 500,000 at the moment. So it's definitely a workout.
Yeah.
But then I'm just really focusing on writing and this feature script called Sybil.
Well, awesome, man. So a little backstory, right? So we actually met you at Genre Blast, right? So we got together, Heath and I, right? Producer Heath is here too. Heath, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm here. Let's talk movies.
Heath is our new super producer. So if you think there's just a weird guy watching us from a distance, you're right. That's super producer Heath. Yeah. So Heath and I got back together. We started making short films. We were trying to fire it back up, right? We were having, I think it's our midlife crisis officially. And so we made this short film about a masturbating priest, and we took it out on the road. And Genre Blast is our favorite festival we've ever been to, right? It's in Virginia. It's an amazing festival of wonderful people. You were the first person I met, right? We were outside in the cool kids smoker section, right? If you weren't there at Genre Blast, you probably missed us, dude. We were with the cool people. Yeah. So we were outside and did a little how do you do. I saw your movie, The Watcher, and I turned to Heath as we were in the theater, and I was like, oh my God, how the fuck did we get our movie in here? Like, we're in big trouble. These are real movies. So I just wanted to start off by talking. I know for Heath and I, these festivals are kind of a lifeblood to us, right? I think one of the hardest thing as a filmmaker is how much work you do that seems to equate to nothing. It's a lot more whip than carrot, if that makes it, to use a cool horse analogy, which people are into. So what I think the festivals give you that lifeblood and energy to keep going in those lonely long stretches. So what does it mean to you? You're obviously getting into a ton of festivals now. What is it that you appreciate about the festival circuit and being surrounded by people all making these indie films?
I think a lot of people say this, but it's the networking, because from film festivals, that's how you create these bonds that last longer than a weekend or a week. Those people usually end up on your film set, whether they're an actor or a crew member or just an extra set of eyes on your script. It's about building community, and it's something I never had before. Yeah. And so when I was doing a lot of the experimental art stuff, and even like my web series that we had on Vimeo for a while that got thousands and thousands of views, I didn't really have a network or a community. I didn't know how to tap into it. And festivals were actually the way into the door of just mingling with people like you who are passionate about films that want to help you. That's the surprising thing, is people want you to succeed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Especially at genre festivals. In a place like Genre Blast, people want you to succeed. And I know, like with Nightmares and also with like Film Quest, like they'll release all the scripts and they say, filmmakers, read these scripts, connect with these writers, see if you're coming back next year with a project, collaboration. And I think that's really important. And that's what I've got mostly out of it, is connecting like with you guys. I don't think I would have ever have seen He Sees All unless I saw it at Genre Blast and then connected with you guys. Which
the algorithm is telling us that's most people's reaction to it.
but I'm not just. I started following you guys and I watched every film you've released online since, and that's what happens when you go to this festival. And it's not just like the casual follow on Instagram. You start really following filmmakers, wanting to know what they do next.
Yes.
And I'm such a fan of your work, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on the podcast, but that's like another added bonus to these festivals, is when you connect, you get to connect with other people's art. And I think that's the most important thing.
I agree, because Heath and I always talk about, for us, it's like the best film festivals feel like just the most awesome summer camp weekend. Like you go and you show up Friday and we're all haggard from traveling. We're all nervous if anyone's going to watch our shit or if they're going to like it. So you usually find people like, outside smoking or at a bar, and you start getting into it and you're like, that's it. This is our band of soldiers for the weekend. And there's those really tight-knit bonds. And again, we've met a ton of people. It's like, if you want us to read something, we'll help you. You help us. Casting. I think that is and again, to your point, the best festivals nurture that we're all in this together. Right?
Yes, exactly.
And if we all help each other, that's good for us. Art doesn't have to be I have to take everything and leave nothing, right? So I think that's cool. To that point, though, your movie is still my favorite short film that we've seen at the festivals. And we were blown away by how fucking incredible short films are today. I think it's one of those, I do wish there was a mechanism in the world that made it easier for people to find awesome short films. I feel like once they hit something like YouTube and stuff, they're just lost in the giant machinations
so true
of what that is. They kind of come and go, right? And some places do a good job of curating, but I wish like my mom had a place where she could watch killer short films and root for people on their way up. So when I saw your short film, right? So The Watcher is essentially the story of a suicide cult, right? And the story centers around the girl who has the unfortunate job of being the one who has to clean and tidy up after everyone else has taken their lives, right? And her kind of battle with this omnipotent tape-recorded voice of the dear leader talking to her, right, as she does her work and beginning to decide if she will join them or not, right? And I it's so funny because Genre Blast, where we saw it together, so many of the movies are so fucking wild and outlandish that yours kind of came in like this fucking beautiful breeze on a hot day, right? Where it's very, and I think this speaks to kind of your style and aesthetic, right? It's this very sublime film. It's very quiet, but it's fucking haunting. It sits on you heavy. Yeah. Despite that lighter initial feel. So what about The Watcher? Just from like a process standpoint, where do you go from, how did you find this idea and decide this was how you wanted to tackle it? And what made you think of the format of how you set the script up with this tape recorder walking us through the aftermath of an event, right?
Yeah. So after shooting a web series and after COVID hit, I was working just solely on feature scripts like a lot of us do, like no more shorts, no more web series.
I got to get paid.
Yeah. You swear them off until you realize you have to make them. Yeah. And so I wrote a script called Devotion that, got a lot of attention, a lot of eyes. And there was quite a few actresses and actors that wanted to do something with it, but it was just too big. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this other, 60, 70 page script called The Watchers. And basically The Watcher comes from that script. It's exactly how the film begins or ends. It's, it could be the cold cut, kind of like into it, and then there's like another 60 whatever pages, and
That's where the monsters come in.
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
spaceships and
those
shit.
monsters, aliens, everything, man, fucking werewolves. No, but what I realized was I have this talent that wants to collaborate. I have this source material that's a lot easier to shoot than Devotion. Maybe I can take a fraction of even this stripped down script, and that's what I did with The Watcher. And I think that's what a lot of films are typically, are they're kind of proof of concepts. But once we started working on the script, or myself and the actress, Sandrine, I realized it was kind of its own thing. Like, maybe this won't be a feature in the way of, like, I kind of like it as a standalone piece. And so
That
that's
said,
kind of
though,
like
send the checks to Nathan Sellers, Kara. Yeah.
yeah. If you want to fund
you
it,
want
I'll
it,
make it.
it's
Yeah. But yeah, so so it became its own thing, and the approach was always, I'm going to have 36 hours to do this.
Wow.
And so how can we communicate these beats or these this narrative within that amount of time? And so everything was about efficiency, and I want to say it was more than that, but it really was, and it was about being creative within limitations. And so I just stripped down that script until it was what we see on screen. Like, if you look at, if you follow the script and watch the short, it's almost exact. There's very little changes in the edit after. And it's because, being an editor myself, I kind of knew how to strip it down. Hopefully make it coherent and cohesive. So that's kind of how it came to be. And that's why it's in kind of like this, really stripped down format. Because you have 36 hours to shoot, and it's like,
that's what you got. Really, time and money are usually the main director of every short that I see. I wanted to talk to you, though. Was there ever a moment for you, right? Because I think of other movies, other messed up kind of movies that feel like they would be brethren to this, right? Like your Midsommars, Wicker Man. It really evokes kind of a folk horror sensibility visually, right?
Yeah.
That said, though, I was there ever a moment where you were drawn more to, it's something I struggle with in my own writing, right? Is having the confidence to show moments of quiet and stillness, right? Because it feels like with something like this, if you were making a suicide cult short, it would be very tempting to show images of the Kool-Aid, as it were, right? Of people gargling their last moments of life. That feels dramatic and powerful in a way. And I think you chose to do the quiet moments that are equally as powerful. How did you wrestle with that balance of showing maybe a little bit more visceral horror moment at possibly the expense of the really horrifying tone that you ended with?
I think I'm a fan of the uncanny within, whether it is paintings or film. And filmmakers like the Austrian filmmaker like Ulrich Seidel, who did the Paradise, what is it? Paradise Love, Paradise. Love, Hope, and
he's listening.
Fate.
You better get this right.
I'm trying to remember. But you have these filmmakers that just challenge an audience in the way of to observe more than to receive the information. And and so for me, I want to explore something that I don't typically see. Like, we've seen the suicide cult kill themselves before in films. We've seen the reaction on their face when, the lights are going out and, everything is becoming dim. We've seen the leader speak to the group, in real time.
I was thinking of like Ty West, The Sacrament, right?
And I love that
slow
film.
build into like a fucking chaotic eruption at the end. And again, I think to your point, when we're sitting at those genre festivals, that point you said of making the audience observe is something you don't get served with that much.
100%. And not to trail back too far, but like someone like Ulrich Seidel or Michael Haneke, or Haneke, people, are always debating on that.
We're Americans. We're allowed to mispronounce whatever the fuck we want.
But and even someone like Lynn Ramsey, they kind of challenge us to kind of sit with these uncomfortable moments, to witness the uncanny of real life. our everyday life. And I think I kind of wanted to approach the film in such a way where we kind of experience this everyday routine, and we kind of piece together what's happening. And it might take another watch, but I'd rather do that than keep on serving you with this, the medicine being like, this is what I mean. This is what you
Yeah.
need to see, like to
Yeah.
understand everything, just shoving it in people's mouths and faces. I hate films like that.
Yeah.
And
That's a
people
graphic
get annoyed,
image.
but with like David Fincher, like it's just, please, I don't need exposition scene at the diner. I fucking can put it together. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it can be hard. And so with this film, I just really tried to focus on the uncanny of everyday life, strip it down so we observe the story and we can kind of put it together. And it might take another watch, but I'd rather do that than kind of be like, look over here, look over there. This is what I
Yeah.
mean. Hint, 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 wink, wink, wink.
Well, even with the device of the cult leader talking us through, right? Like we get the experience of how someone gets stuck in a cult, right? And I think there's a level of emotional authorship that you're allowed. Again, we make the kind of genre film festivals that aren't necessarily thinkers all the time, right? Me and my writing partner think about this shit a lot, and we'll be fighting for like an hour and a half, and then we're like, it's a dick joke. What are we doing here? Like, just get it done, right? And again, I think that emotional authorship space, right? Because I think a lot of us are like, we're nobody. We got to scream as loud as we fucking can so people will turn and look. And I think this one achieves a volume that is surprising for the tone, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think that him walking us through and the still, it's that emotional authorship is what I latched onto. The movie really expects me to be an active viewer, which I thought was cool. Using this to go to your next film, what drew you to doing a horror documentary? So Methuselah, if I'm getting this right, you can say it better than me, I'm sure, is essentially, it is like watching a poem be read to us as we visually watch how trees are used to destroy and maim and cause pain to human bodies, and how the trees are unwitting participants, right? They are made to be part of our crimes, which is not which are against the laws of nature, right? And it's an interest. So I'd like to start there. How did you find this subject? What was your source materials that you were looking at? Why do this horror documentary as your follow-up to The Watchers?
It wasn't supposed to be the follow-up. I wrote this other short called Pinhole, and we were set to shoot. And the day before arriving on set, so the car's packed with all the equipment, and crew is all checked in, and we're ready to go. We got another two COVID cases. And then I had pink eye and I couldn't see out of my right eye.
So you would have been watching
what good
through
am I as a
pinhole.
director if I can't even exactly see? And so we had actors coming in from New York City. It was a mess. And so from that, I was kind of, I took the weekend off to shoot this other short and was really excited, and I have all weekend and I couldn't sit with idle hands. So what I did was I decided to go through my B footage, like stuff I shoot. Just for shits and giggles. And while I was doing that, I realized that in every shoot since 2017, I would just, when there was quiet on set, I would take the camera and I would film nature, primarily trees. And I once I found this pattern, I had to ask myself, why am I so fascinated? And what I realized is that it's trauma. And the reason why is because the story of Methuselah is real. When I was 7, I was told about lynchings when I was on my grandfather's farm. And my cousin was pointing at these trees being like, oh, this person was lynched here and that person was lynched there.
Dude.
Yeah, it was really fucked up. And I was 7. And so it was the first time that I dealt with such immense sadness. And I didn't know what to do with it. And since then, I'll be on walks with my kids and I just focus on trees, and I'm always reminded of that moment on my grandfather's, farm.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is something. So I sat down, and so the narration is me and just writing these thoughts out. And I wrote it in an hour, maybe an hour and a
That's
half.
incredible. I actually was wondering when I was watching it, I was like, is this a poem that I had never heard of?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
very beautiful and moving, and it has kind of a swelling nature to it. It's interesting. I would never have guessed that's where this came from, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so again, I think one of the other things that's beautiful besides the writing of it, what I think it became a fun thing. So do you ever think of as a director your kind of stylistic palette, right? I think you more than most of the filmmakers we've met. To me, I feel like if someone asked me, I could pretty clearly articulate or pick from a list things that are yours. You seem to have a distinct kind of style and taste that I picked up on in the couple things of yours that I've watched. And this one I thought was pretty interesting because it is this sort of blank slate art house approach to the visuals we're watching, right? And you can see a lot of the choices you make in that you are somewhat painting with a heavy hand, right? What you want us to see. So
Yeah.
was that something on purpose? Was that a fun exercise in refining your kind of style?
Yeah, it definitely was on purpose because, like, with the Watcher, we have time to sit and
Yeah.
observe, right? Um, and with Methuselah, I wanted us. It's going to be 4 minutes, 5 minutes at most. I knew that since
Hmm.
the beginning. So I'm like, what do I want to communicate? And so after writing the narration or just my thoughts down or the script, you could say, I looked through the footage and I'm like, what could convey this this stanza? What
Hmm.
could convey this moment? And I knew it was gonna kind of unravel into chaos, and because that's just how our thoughts, that's how we react to trauma. We start with one feeling, one memory, and then it just keeps on ramping up until it just spirals. And that's how I wanted the film to, be quote unquote projected. And
Right.
so when I thought, oh, I want it to be almost a projection, I was like, no, it's going to be a projection. It's going to be a slideshow like we're in a classroom. It's history class, but the history lesson
Yeah.
literally takes a really dark, almost possessed turn.
Yeah.
And
The
so
teacher's
that's,
retiring at the end of the year. He's got nothing
yeah,
left to
he's just
lose.
like, hey, this is,
He's
yeah.
gonna put you through the paces.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wanted the haunting itself to almost take over the projection, the slides. And
Yeah.
I knew that as filmmakers, we know this stuff. Like, your film has to be deeper than it is long if you
Yeah.
really want to communicate something. So what are the layers here? And then I started with sound, and I'm like, then what's the sound? Okay, it's the slides, the projections.
Hmm.
Okay, what kind of pattern will that be? And then that's when I started playing around again with the Fibonacci sequence. I think last conversation we kind of dabbled in that, this idea of taking things that you see in everyday life, like a spiral, and applying it to your own work. And so that's
Hmm.
why the projection starts out slow and then it speeds up and it follows that kind of mathematical sequence. And I've done that before with the short and it worked successfully. So I thought with this I could do the same. And so I started with that. But um, yeah, the idea of the slides themselves being interrupted and showing even more and more violent images, like they're kind of interrupting the
Hmm.
narration to truly expose the truth, not just my own reflection and thoughts, but to be like, well, this is history.
Yeah, it's a classic. To be crass, it's a classic honey dick method, right? You draw them in, or a drug dealer. The first taste is free. Yeah, that's what I should have said. We'll see if Heath lets me off the hook and edits that. Don't edit that. I
Now
want the people.
you're stuck with it.
Yeah, I want the people to hear that. I am aware you will not trick me again. You can't fool me a second time.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
I
did
think
want
this
to jump in.
Oh, go
Griffey,
ahead.
can I pick up on that real fast before
Yes.
you move on? Because I thought Nate was really telling that you said you started with sound. Because if I were to pick out a signature quality in your filmmaking, it's the soundscape that you're able to craft. Can you talk just a little bit about the importance of coming to what your audio is going to be and how you put that together in post production or how
Yeah.
you even conceive of it? Because the Watcher has that device, that really haunting device with the recording.
Yeah.
And you use some similar effects in Methuselah. And I just feel like filmmakers don't talk about sound enough. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that quality in your work. It's something I strive to do too. Yeah. So what are your thoughts there?
So I think it's a few things. One is like Brian De Palma is like since a kid watching his films and understanding textures, but besides just the picture, but sound is really important. And I remember being young and watching like Blowout or something like that, and just being like, "Whoa, it's the sound that's driving this film." Yes, the visuals are cool, but it's the sound. And so I think when I started making my own film, especially the experimental stuff, I was like, what are the textures here? Like, this is my bass sound, and then let's build from there. And I think the three of us are musicians, right? So like we understand like songwriting and we understand how the components kind of come together and stuff. And so for me, it's almost like writing a song. And I start with say the guitar part or just say what I want the room tone to be. And then from there, I start building off of that. And it can be influenced by characters and their decisions, but it can also be decided by their environment. And so I think coming from a music background, being a lover of, Brian De Palma's work is part of it. But the other thing too is, this sounds really lame. I'm not one to really meditate, but I do like just sitting and listening, like outside, or like if I'm getting annoyed and I'm in line somewhere, I'll just close my eyes and listen. And the environment becomes so much more interesting, like so much more interesting. You pick up on stuff you wouldn't have before if you're just like losing your shit or just like staring off at looking at your phone. And so what I realized with doing the Watcher, it was right during COVID and I was taking more time to myself. I was like, oh, I want to add those elements into the film. And so I think just taking that time to myself has influenced my work in such a way of like, oh, you really do hear this type of bird at this time of day. You know what I mean? Like no one watching The Watcher is going to be like, wait a second.
I clearly lead a too chattery life that I have not noticed these things before.
But that's the stuff I write down in my notes on my phone is like, that's how I create the texture. And so I think that has influenced my work as well, is just kind of taking those moments, especially because a lot of my work kind of looks at everyday life, but through more of an uncanny lens. So you kind of want to base it in reality as much as possible, even if the audience, isn't pointing it out or fully realizes it. You want to steep them in reality as much as possible. So that's part of it.
Audio is definitely the most underutilized and underappreciated tool, it feels like, in the filmmaker bag, especially at our level. I do think that's an interesting place to transition, right? When you are making your films are obviously very personal, very focused on these kind of small realities, right? These very relatable real world scenarios, right? And then the kind of horror and genre stuff blossom from that.
Yeah.
You are also a producer, right? Yeah. What is the difference in your philosophy, right? When picking your projects that you want to pursue as your own artistic endeavors, versus what you sign on to produce? What is your decision-making process in that arena?
I think when it comes to producing work, it has to grab my attention just like my own work does, obviously. But I don't work on anything that doesn't say something. Like I want my work to speak of something beyond just with what's in the frame. And like whether it's the Thaw or it's this new stop motion film I'm working on feature called Alma, it kind of speaks to something within society. With my own work, I try to look at it in a very micro way, and these films look at it in a very macro way. If that makes sense, in the larger scope. And so I think the films I produce and the films I make have something to say, whether it's about society or the human condition, yada, yada, yada. But with my work, I try to focus on an aspect of it. And I think a lot of these films kind of look at more like global issues and things like that. And because I think, to be honest, it's kind of like the idea that if you really want to get to know someone, you ask them like a few simple questions and you can get what you want out of them.
Right.
Like just be more specific, be more detail oriented. And I think with my own work, instead of thinking in a grander way, I'm trying to ask those very specific questions that gives us, something that's a little bit more potent and, textured, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, me and my writing partner, I do that a lot in my own when we're like laying out characters, right? What is the character? What do they do? What's their arc? The weird first thing I always ask is I'm like, what would they eat for breakfast? And it like weirdly has been a very helpful place for me to start. 'Cause you're like, is he a fucking drug addict who doesn't eat breakfast, right? Does he have heroin for breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Is he a street worker, right? And he's having, flesh for breakfast. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Or Captain Crunch. Like it sets me in a place where, again, those little teeny tiny things really do extrapolate out. Like you can tell a lot from someone by those smaller moments, right? Because if you just go at it big, like he's an angry cop, you're like, well, there's a fucking ton of different versions of that.
Yeah.
What's he have for breakfast, right? So I do that a lot too. I think that's a great way. Again, I think, especially as indie filmmakers, I think, again, the only thing we have to offer is our point of views, right? That is literally the only, anyone can make any movie better than us if you put a studio behind it and enough money and, the best people at their crafts or whatever. We're all usually ragtag groups of people who are still chasing a dream. Right? And we are giving of ourselves and we are making for less. That's the inherent nature of what we're doing. We are the only value, right? Our taste, our point of view, the things we think are important. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Is there any moments where you get a script or you have a project idea and you're torn between which side it belongs on?
Definitely lately since The Watcher, I've been given a lot of scripts like, would you want to direct this or would you want to produce it? I'm open to directing other people's material, but usually if someone's sending me something, I'll produce it probably,
right,
rather than direct it. But I've had the privilege of looking at a lot, and I have contemplated like, oh, is this something that I would make? Is this something that really pulls my interest? And usually it's something that interests me, but I realize maybe I don't have the current tools, or maybe it's not really in my wheelhouse of what I would like to craft, if that makes sense. And that's usually what I'll produce. But sometimes it's just someone being like, hey, like what you've produced, could you, jump on board with this?
Yeah.
Or what are your ideas?
Hey,
on
work
that?
is work, man.
Work is work. Exactly. So it happens that way. But I would say more recently, I've had to make more of a decision of, is this something that I would want to direct, or if it's something that I'd rather produce or be a creative consultant on, which is another thing I do often, is I will put my eyes on people's scripts and kind of break it down and think of how they can express something a bit more creatively, or how they can get rid of this or get rid of that kind of thing as well. But
yeah, that can be a hard road to plow sometime. I used to be a screenplay analyst for a long time, and there's love and hate in that job. Speaking to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about your writing process, right?
Oh yeah,
because you also write most of the stuff that you direct, or all of it at this point. But when you are, just a quick summary of, what is your methodology from going from a seed of an idea to the script? Are you an in-depth outliner? Do you have a system you like to follow? Are you a kind of by the seat of your pants writer? How do you go from seedling idea to first draft?
So I have to have a scene that works first. And once I have a scene that works, I'll craft an outline. So the concept will come up, and then I'll kind of have a visual or an idea of like, ooh, how would I shoot that? Or where would I place the camera? And if that intrigues me, I then kind of play with the idea of how that scene unravels.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm like, oh, that works. Now I can kind of write the beginning and then write the end and then fill it in. And that's how I usually outline this, because I always need the beginning to mirror the end visually as well as narratively. maybe I don't need, but I enjoy writing that way.
Yeah.
And so it comes out usually with the concept paired with the visual. And if it completes a scene, then I'll then be like, this is worth outlining. And then from there, I'll then write from the beginning to the end, typically. Sometimes there's a scene that I'm excited to write. Like with this
Yeah.
new one, Sybil, I wrote maybe the ending and up in Act 3 before completing Act 2.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to it, things changed a bit. But that's how I usually operate.
Yeah. I usually have an image, like a really strong image pops in my head, more than a concept, right? And you're like, how do I turn that into a story? Is there any tips or tricks you picked up along the way, especially writing features, right? This happens a lot more in a feature, I find, where you have that really strong image you want, right? Like when they adapted, per se, the movie Doubt from a stage play to a film, right? It was that scene of Philip Seymour Hoffman on the bench with the mom and them just fucking going at it, right? That's when we're like, oh, this can be a movie, not a play, right? So a lot of us, I think, have that image or that moment, that thing we want to do. I think sometimes in features, you can get really bogged down in minutia, right? Outlines and structures and page counts and this and that. Is there anything you have when you hit those rough moments that you fall back on to get you back on track?
Yeah, there's a few things I do. When I feel like I'm in the thick of it, I typically will step away because what I realize is at that moment it might be I'm acting not in desperation, but in like, let's get this scene done. Like, oh, let's
that is
let's
my
complete
greatest
this.
sin,
Let's move on. And what happens in those moments is you'll rush the dialogue. The exposition is like too heavy because you just want to go to the next part. And so stepping away is a huge help because if I step away for a day or two, then I come back to it, even though it might be slowing down my writing process per se, I come at it and I'm like, ooh, like I almost went off the rails there. I need to draw back. And then, so like a fresh pair of eyes is really helpful in those moments and not trying to push yourself through to prove like I can write it in a week or in a weekend or
damn, you don't have to get so personal with me, brother.
Yeah. and that often happens when you have kids and a family and you're just like, I only have this small amount of time to write. And like for me,
or you're hitting middle age and you feel the fucking reaper coming closer.
But like I'll write for, I have maybe 2 hours a day that I can really write. And so instead of trying to push through, I will choose to kind of step away. And I think that's a common practice. But the other thing, too, is, especially with dialogue, I'll ignore the description and just go to the words and scan up and down on my computer. And if it reads like a conversation, I'm good. And if it sounds natural, depending on, of course, your style and all that kind of stuff, we're good. But if it starts sounding clunky and I'm using the description to kind of boost the dialogue or to carry the dialogue, I know I'm in trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then that's a trick. And then I'm like, oh, I'm relying too much on these descriptions. Right. Because then that puts too much pressure on me as the director to hit those visuals. You know what I mean? I want to be more, like, I want to be.
You're helping yourself now.
You're helping yourself.
But you're hurting yourself.
Sure this is concrete, so then,
that's exactly. The classic we'll fix it in post approach that people despise.
and the same thing too is like sometimes you have to ask yourself if something's not working. You have to be honest with yourself, and sometimes it is that original image you have of that scene that is kind of, you think it's such a centerpiece to the moment, but it really isn't. It's helped lead you into this great scene, but it might not have to be there. So I think stepping away is good. Focusing on the dialogue for me personally and leaving out the descriptions for a while to see if that jives, but also really question every element of the scene and to ask yourself, does it really have a purpose? There's that common thing. Every scene, does it lead to the ending or does it point to the ending? And not every scene has to, but it's a really good rule of thumb because if you have this scene that's creative and has a good vibe, and it's just in the middle of your film and it doesn't really lean too much to the ending. And like, anyway, people will be like, that was great, but what was that? And it happens. And even a film like Tree of Life by Terrence Malick, you're like, geez, like in the editing. But at the same time, every frame leads to that ending. And like I broken it
I
down
wish I wanted to rewatch Tree of Life because I feel like that's horse shit. But
yeah, no.
I feel like that's branches that could be paired, but maybe you're right.
Well, the reason why is because he had a really well written script, like an amazing script that everything worked. And then when he became fragments within the editing, even though it's placed, wherever, it leads to the ending. And so that's why, even though it's fragmented, it can be annoying, people hate it. It points to something. It's grounded in something.
It's still unified.
It's unified in this way. And so that's another thing.
You're very zen. I'll show you something. I keep this on my desk. It's actually a Marvel comic books creation, but it's essentially the Grim Reaper with huge tits. And it sits right under my monitor so that every day I sit down, it points to me and say that I'm closer to death. Yeah, and I have to write a bunch of pages every day. You have a much more zen approach.
No, don't do that.
Literally, I just am turned on and scared every time I sit. That could explain a lot about my writing. It's just, death with giant... I don't know if it's scarier to get killed by death if it has a great Baywatch body. It feels like it now that I think about it.
I was just going to quickly say, I think we might have discussed this when we were talking about Cure and a little bit, but Kiyoshi Kurosawa, his whole approach is if like you hold on to something too tight, you'll break it. Or if you try to force something, you'll break it. And so sometimes to be more efficient or to give yourself more creative liberty, you have to be a little bit more kinder in your approach to writing, or give yourself a little bit of room. And then sometimes that's when you just like fire away, or you're just off to the races. You know what I mean? And
it's my Midwestern upbringing. I can't settle into the.
See, I understand like screenwriting is a job, and I understand it as this thing that needs to be done. And I love the idea of writing every day, whether it's like the same time or finding a time that works for you. But I think for me, when I do that, that's often when I find myself in a corner, or like we were saying. But so I think you're right, and I don't know if I'd call myself Zen, but the approach of letting whatever happens, and sometimes it's a good day, sometimes it's not. But
I find that to be the loneliest and hardest phase, where like the most doubt and anger creeps in. So I need these reminders sometimes from other writers that this is okay. This happens to all of us. Something I did want to also talk about, right? Getting from your writing to your movies. I think you find a really interesting balance of kind of subtle and horrifying that I really latched onto. What do you find are challenges you face bringing disturbing images to the screen?
Sometimes I have to ask myself, is it too much? Because there's like with my films, you don't really see the horror until the end, or it's kind of fragmented until it's a complete picture. And I have to ask myself, is it too heavy-handed? Is it too much? With the Watcher, I think we might have discussed this last time too, when we're focused on the dead woman's face. I asked my wife, when do you want to look away? And she said, now. And then I said, good, because I'm going to add 3 seconds to it. But that kind of forces the audience. But I have to question sometimes, is that too much?
See, I love that, because I feel like we're in an era now of overshowing everything, right? It is much more now an act of survival at times when you're watching horror movies.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think like that's why I describe myself or describe my work as sort of horror infused dramas. Is a lot. They're kind of these dramas that I infuse horror at these moments. And when you do that, you have to ask yourself, is it not enough, or is it too much? Mm-hmm. And like with The Watcher, I felt good with the imagery. It was about but how to portray it or how to capture it. That was the trick. And I think when you're in editing, it usually reveals itself, like most things. Yeah, and that's the power of editing. Is like, let's hold on that a bit longer, or let's just scrap it or whatever. But I think that's the challenge, is when you do something subtly, you have to. If it's heavy, it's way more noticeable. and the audience picks up on it, and it just doesn't work. And so I think it's just a process in the way of through editing and through showing others and stuff. But yeah, it's a process. But
on that note, have you had what is the weirdest unexpected reactions you've had from your movie? Did you ever have anyone come up and be like, I was in a cult too. I fucking love that.
Best years of my life.
I look back so fondly.
Well, there was, I was able to get a screening of it like to an audience before a festival or before it went over to Europe at the Alamo Draft House in New York, and some professors from NYU got to grade it or write their comments, and then students. And the weirdest comment I got was, "Man, this guy sure likes feet." And I think we talked about this.
You did the full Tarantino.
It's just like, no, it's the opposite. I hate feet so much. And for me, like, the most grotesque thing I could show is dead feet. Like, the first thing you see to be like, oh, the bodies are still here, are a dead pair of feet. Or two dead pairs of feet.
Yeah, blink twice if you're lying to the audience.
Yeah.
It's okay, dude. It's a no judgment zone.
It was a weird comment because I was like, damn it, no, I don't. And then
I think you're projecting your shit onto me, sir. That's what I think's happening.
This guy likes feet. But it makes me like when even with this new script while I was writing, and I describe how the characters centering themselves and their feet, being grounded, their bare feet being grounded, I was like, and we won't show the feet, It was like, I'm like, that comment like really messed me up. I'm like, God, hopefully people don't think this.
Yeah, it is insane, the one little thing in your script or your short that people will take and it completely changes everything for them.
Yeah. No, totally. And so that was the weirdest one, being like, this dude has a foot fetish, and I'm just like, no, man, it's disgusting.
Yeah. All right. So on that, do you have any do you see in your work, right? Or when you're pursuing something, do you find that there are character types or themes that you are constantly returning to? Safe places for you, or unsafe, I guess, as it were.
Yeah, I grew up very, very religious, like evangelical Christian.
Same, bro. Yeah.
And so for me, a lot of it is questioning faith. Like the Watcher, Danielle, or the Watcher itself, the woman we follow, that's my story. This idea of like following these teachings, and then at a point when you're ready to fully commit, or you have been committed, but when it's like now you're really plunging in, you're just like, wait, no, hold the phone. You really pick up on what is actually happening around you, and how it's affecting you in ways you never thought. And so, like, I think it's there in the Watcher, but also in this next script, Sybil, too. It's about I think beyond the idea of the death of God or questioning faith in like a Ingmar Bergman sort of way. I think it looks at the rituals of it, and I think it's really important to do so because we're such ritualistic human beings, and we are so habitual. Mm-hmm. And I think that people relate to that aspect of religion, even if they're not religious themselves. So you can kind of use that as kind of a template, and right. That's what I often do, is use human's habitual nature and within my work, whether it's the Watcher or this next one, and even the show that was streaming on Vimeo was about how this cancer patient is habitually and like still going out on dates even though she has cancer. And it's just like, oh, I'm not breaking that. I'm going to continue to date, regardless of dying.
You miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think for me, it's like about routine. It's about rituals, habits. I think that's riddled throughout my work.
Yeah, it's definitely a rich field with which to plow. All right, 2 more questions. One, if I gave you, Nathan Sellers, the proverbial Disney blank check, and I said all the resources you want, no restrictions of any kind, is there a dream project, franchise, remake that you would pursue?
I'm terrified to make anything over 500,000. So even with a blank check, I would be like, let's go for literally. I can't think of something that I would want to make. There's a lot of things I would love to see someone else make with a blank check. But for me,
you don't want to see like Watchers versus Predator?
Yeah.
You don't want to just mash them together?
Maybe. No, if I was given a blank check, I would probably work on this new one, Sybil, and just make it for
just your own jam.
Sense. Yeah, just my own jam, and just kind of do
Before you
like
decide, though, have you ever Googled Predator's feet?
Oh, no.
You might be in, dude.
God, okay. But I'm
just going to propagate this comment now. I'm going to be like, hey, Nathan Sellers, the guy who likes feet? Yeah,
feet? I know him. Oh, my God.
All right, and one last question. If you could tell anyone one resource that could help them begin their creative journey as a filmmaker, what is your favorite filmmaking resource you would tell someone to check out?
That there's so many books that I think are great. There's some channels too that are great to check out. But to be honest, it would be like one of Werner Herzog's books on filmmaking, to be honest, because he has such a unique approach to what filmmaking is and what it means. And for you as a filmmaker, but as also an audience. And I think it's really inspiring because it's not like films are made this way, or make sure there's that great advice about, how to produce a film, right? But if you want to get into writing, if you want to get into creating, instead of just like, how do I produce my first film? I think something by Werner Herzog would be great, because his approach is unique, but also it's vast and open to interpretation. So anyone could, take their own idea and roll with his suggestions and kind of like the resources he gives. So, but I think, stuff by Werner Herzog, his books are invaluable,
Yeah, he has a wonderful masterclass if you're ever into that.
It's amazing.
That's the one where he's like, just walk in a straight line and cut bolts and get arrested. This is the bloody and you're just like,
what
this
movies
guy's
to
talking
watch?
my language, Like, what?
Yeah, but even it's like, what movies to watch? And he's like, just read poetry.
Just watch The Burden of Dreams, as that guy just is I don't hear the birds singing, I hear them screaming as the jungle rapes them. And you're like, Jesus Christ, my movies aren't like that. Unbelievable.
But I don't know. I think like someone like Harmony Korine kind of has that approach too. So if anything that dude writes as well about, filmmaking, I'd follow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Thank you so much, Nathan, for joining us here on our Filmmaker Friday. Yeah, go ahead, Heath.
Just a few producer notes, if you don't mind. Just wanted to circle back for anybody who wants to go back and listen, some of the interesting bullet points and a little bit of cleanup here. So first of all, the Paradise trilogy that you referenced, Nate, that was indeed Love, Faith. Both of those came out in 2012, and then Hope in 2013.
Yes. Yep.
This is incredible. Is
that like, I'm unfamiliar with this. Is this sort of like the same approach that the Three Colors trilogy?
Yeah, and so it follows three women in one family, and you follow the mom on like this like African love cruise where she just finds men to bed, and then you follow the aunt who's obsessed with religion and who's a devout Catholic who uses her vacation to evangelize, and then you follow the daughter who goes to a fat camp. And
I know which ticket I'm buying.
It's interesting. It's kind of like exactly.
Gotta check those out.
Trilogy. Yeah, they're awesome.
Some other notes I had. I was just really impressed by how self-aware Nate is as a filmmaker. I don't think a lot of filmmakers are able to tap into or take an out of body experience and kind of see their work for maybe what it is. A lot of it's intuitive, but I mean, you seem like an intuitive filmmaker. However, you also have a really firm grasp of what it is that you do and what you like and what you're pursuing. And I thought the uncanny comment really nailed. I had some bullet points and notes about what your style might be. I was thinking, folk horror, ethereal, but I think uncanny really nails that feeling that is so hard to describe.
Yeah, yeah. And even like say the works of Flannery O'Connor, like those are the influence, I think, are those short stories. And because of the uncanny and the honesty of just looking at society for what it is, not your just mere interpretation of it. And that's where you find, the disturbing, fucked up stuff.
Yeah. There's plenty of it going around for sure.
I'm glad that resonated, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing when we were talking about making this the Messed Up Movies podcast, what does that entail? Is that just extreme horror? Is that gore? Is that Terrifier? And I think what you do fits in just as easily as all of that. I mean, there's just this uncomfortable dread feeling that permeates that, you can't really describe or explain, but you feel. And that's just as messed up to me, like the Michael Haneke films, even Ari Aster, they're able to tap into that. And that's just as messed up and weird and gross and uncomfortable in its own way as
100%.
As any of the obvious examples. And then the last thing, Griffey, we should make sure that we put links to Nathan's work in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if it's worth it. No, I'm just playing. Yeah, of course. You should go find all of Nathan's work. I know The Watcher is on Vimeo, so we'll have that link in the description below. Is Methuselah out yet? You said it's not because it's on the festival circuit, correct?
Yeah, it's out for this week, but again...
Yeah, if you have a time machine, go to Nathan's Film Festival and watch Methuselah.
No,
would you like to tell people where they can find you online so that when it is available, they'll be there to watch it?
So you could, again, go to www.lonehorsefilms.com, and my handle as well for Instagram is N as in Nathan, Ben as in Benjamin, Sellers at no, not at gmail.com. That's my email. But at nben sellers, at nben sellers is my handle.
We'll drop that down below if that was confusing. Find Nathan's work at Hotmail as of 1998. He has an AOL Instant Messenger.
I did.
Stuff 14 exclamation point. That's where you can find Nathan on AOL. I still have my AOL Instant Messenger. It was Dragon Drummer 621. It was very cool. I thought that was going to lead to good stuff. It did not. But
mine was Ska Surfer.
Oh my God! Yeah, we were really trying to tell the world. This was before social media. This was our first chance to define ourselves online.
I like ska. One day I'll hopefully surf.
I know I don't live near a beach, but I'm going to try. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. Go to the show notes, find all the stuff. You can go back in the catalog, right? Even though we have transitioned to Messed Up Movies, you can still find the episode we did with Nathan on Cure, an incredible, kind of just unsettling, horrifying movie. If you've never seen that, go check that out. Thank you to Heath for the support. Usually I just lie on here and get stuff wrong and pray no one notices, so thank you for that.